Good morning. Today is May 18th, 2013. My name is Charles Schaller, and I'm conducting an oral history interview in Waukegan, Illinois, with Ed Huesing, a U.S. Army Reserve veteran. And let's get it going. You were born in February, a year after me. Yeah, we both graduated from high school in 1953. Were you precocious? Because I wasn't held back.
1953, yeah, that's correct.
You were only 17.
That's right.
Oh, the time is 25 minutes of 10.
Say the time again when we end.
Yes. So you were graduated only at the age of 17. That's quite young.
That's correct, yes.
Were you unusually precocious?
I was pushed ahead a half year. They were in, I don't know, first or second grade, I don't remember which. They had the half year deal going, and I was pushed ahead a half year. So that's why.
You enlisted while still in high school.
Correct.
Was it because the Korean War was officially still going on? I mean, the armistice was going to be signed in July of 1953, but this was April.
No, matter of fact, the man who was the first sergeant of the 85th Division Band came around to our band class. Otto Graham was the director at that time in Waukegan High School, and he allowed Tom Mayfield to come up and do a little recruiting talk for us. And I was really prepared to go into the Navy, but it sounded like a pretty good deal to be able to play in an Army band, and that's the reason. Really, the Korean War had nothing to do with it, other than the fact that they explained to us that we'd be in a unit, and probably if we were called, we'd go as a unit. And so that's.
So your first days in service, I mean, did you go through boot camp and all those good things?
Boot camp was interesting because we did it, I think it was 2 or 3 summer camps in a row. It was very intense. We had to maintain the same scores as regular Army people, but it was done in addition to our band duties, and it was very intensive. Much of the training was done back at home station in Waukegan, or Farnsworth at the time. It was we met at Grays Lake before the Armory was built here in Waukegan.
Do you remember any instructor in particular as being particularly inspiring or tough, or both?
1 or 2, because they were also at the time were the assistant PMS and Ts at Waukegan High School, and they had joined the reserve unit. They'd retired from the regular Army and joined the reserve unit. One was a guy named Bill Gench, and the other was William Souza, who went on to be the athletic director at Warren High School and retired as a bird colonel from the reserve. And those 2 were probably influential in my early career.
Your service began during the Korean War and it lasted until after the United States left Vietnam. What was it like? Did the attitude toward what you were doing and how you were doing it, did it change during those 27 years?
Yeah, it really did. It was. We were kind of the hand-me-downs of the regular Army for a long time. It was the last years after I transferred over into the 1st Brigade that we began to notice that the Army was really relying a lot more on the reserve than they did. The Reserve National Guard were kind of the red-headed stepchildren, so to speak, of the regular Army. They said one Army, one team, but they didn't really believe it at that time. But we always felt that we were equal.
The 85th Division was a training outfit.
Started out, when I first joined, it was an infantry division, and they changed that designation someplace in the late 50s, early 60s, I don't remember exactly, went to a training division, and we were responsible for writing protocols and that sort of thing for various installations and units. And in my opinion, we did it very well.
You were in the Army band. In fact, this was the thing that kind of drew you into it. What was it like to be a part of the band? And I will put in a personal note here. My father was a World War I veteran, and he happened to be in Milwaukee when John Philip Sousa led the Marine Band into the city, and he said he never forgot it his whole life long. What was it like to be on the operating side of being in the band?
It was great. We had a really, really fine unit. The bandmaster was a man from Zion, Illinois, named Willis Mayfield, and he was an outstanding musician. We had many really fine musicians that were in the band. I don't count myself among them. I was okay at best, I guess. But we had some really, really good musicians, and we performed in all over the northern Illinois, South Carolina, Louisiana, and Missouri, parades, concerts, that sort of thing. One of the highlights was our deputy division commander in 1958, John S. Gleason Jr., was elected commander of the American Legion, and the convention was held in Chicago for the first time in 30 years. And he mobilized the units of the division, and it was a 10.5-hour long parade. In other words, at one point it would have taken you 10.5 hours to view that parade. The 85th Division Band led that parade, and that was really kind of a highlight of my career. That was early on in my career. But
You were a trumpeter.
Trumpet player, yes.
Do you still play the trumpet?
I haven't touched it since 1970 when I transferred to 1st Brigade.
Well, I was going to ask you, why did you switch from being a trumpeter to being in the business of making sure that the Army was well supplied?
It was an interesting thing. We had a commanding general who just recently passed away who decided he wanted the band at the division headquarters in Chicago. The band had been here ever since it was instituted, reinstituted when the division was reactivated. And we were known as the pride of Lake County. And all the advertisements, and anytime we appeared any place, that was always a thing that the local press brought out. He decided it would be a better thing to have the band at division headquarters. He virtually destroyed it as a result, because we were able to recruit because we had people who were local and we were in the community, well known in the community. But he virtually destroyed the band. The division has been, the colors have been retired the last 4 or 5 years, so the division is no longer an active reserve unit anymore. But like I said, the band went downhill from that point. And I decided I didn't want to go to Chicago, so I transferred in the brigade. Never looked back.
Now, you said you did a whole lot of traveling with the band. Were you at various different posts in the United States for any period of time?
Only for the 2 weeks annual training, and we did a lot then. Of course, like I said, we played parades and concerts for the Boys' Home of Missouri, University of South Carolina, St. Martinville, Louisiana, and veterans hospitals. That's right. In addition to concerts on the military posts, the various posts we were assigned to, and various parts of the band would break down sometimes as they needed a combo for a particular event, that sort of thing. And so we were always very active, and also had to maintain our military proficiencies.
So when you became the Chief Supply NCO, did this involve a posting to another part of the country?
No, it was still at the Waukegan. The 1st Brigade headquarters was at Waukegan, and it was just coincidental that the band was also assigned there. When I think largely because the bandmaster was from the area, but no, that's where the 1st Brigade could have gone to. In fact, I was invited when they promoted me to Master Sergeant. The Division Sergeant Major wanted me to come to Chicago to be the G4 sergeant. I said, well, if I'd wanted to travel, I would have probably gone with the band. But,
So your post basically was Waukegan.
Yes.
Okay. Well, looking back over 1953 to 1980, it's 27 years. What were your most memorable experiences, would you say?
Oh, I have many. Probably the most memorable thing were all the really great people I served with. There were some outstanding people that were mentors to me, so to speak, good officers, good senior NCOs that I was associated with, and some real interesting characters, the guys that were a lot of fun to be around. But that would probably be the most memorable thing. And I have a great deal of satisfaction that when I came over to 1st Brigade, the Army had instituted a policy of one unit station training. In other words, you took your basic at the same post you were going to go to your AIT on. And these posts had never done basic training before. There were 2 or 3 basic training posts, Fort Jackson, Fort Leonard Wood, and Fort Ord, California. But Ord was on its last legs when we went there. Mm-hmm. And so we wrote policy for many of these posts that we went into after they instituted this training. And I was able to write the supply policy for a couple of these. And that was a great deal of satisfaction doing that, to come back the next year and see that they were doing it the way we had recommended it. That was a great deal of personal satisfaction.
What does being the chief supply NCO, what does that entail precisely? I mean, is this like the quartermaster corps?
It's the Army doesn't use that term very often anymore. And the title went from Chief Logistics NCO. It started as Chief Supply NCO, Chief Logistics NCO, then back. Mm-hmm. So it was to see that the paperwork and everything came through that each battalion and each company was supplied with what they needed. Basically, the initial issue, make sure that they got the initial issue of personal equipment, but also to see that all the organizational equipment was in place and well maintained. Matter of training the battalion supply people, and we made many staff visits to the units that were spread all over northern Illinois. There was a unit in Princeton, Peru area, Aurora, Illinois, Rockford, Rock Island, one in Chicago for a time, and then the Waukegan unit. Excuse me. We spent many hours with them inspecting their records to make sure that their records were in correct order, and seeing that they had what they needed when they needed it. And it was interesting when we went from infantry to armored recon. The last 3 or 4 years I was in, my property book went from $1 million or so to several $1 million. With the 1st Brigade was armored recon, so we had armored personnel carriers rather than the M60 tanks the other units had. But
here comes a tough question. I mean, we read now and then about equipment that mysteriously goes missing or somehow won't function the way it's supposed to. These things happen. But did any of that happen on your watch?
Oh, of course not. Interesting thing that somebody once told me that 95% of the equipment that goes missing in the military doesn't actually leave the military. It just goes to somebody that needs it worse than the guy who had it originally. And I guess I did see some of that. I might have been party to some of that from time to time, but there was never anything that was really illegal that we did. We had some problems when I came over to 1st Brigade that the civilian people were operating on kind of a good old boy network. They knew everybody that was in the loop from Fort Sheridan up to Fort McCoy. I didn't like that, and I alienated this civilian for quite a while because I said we're doing it by the book from this point on. Mm-hmm. And we did, and it worked fine. And but again, saying that, there was never any hint of any impropriety. He just had his way of doing things, and the equipment was always there, and there was never any hint of anything going amiss. So.
Well, you mentioned that the band basically fell due to or deteriorated due to things beyond the control of those who were in the band. Was it your choice to move to supply?
No, it was interesting how that happened. There were 4 or 5 of senior NCOs and the bandmaster. Joe Favero was the bandmaster he was president of the Park District here in Waukegan for a while. And he and 3 or 4 others of the senior NCOs transferred. There was never a problem with the transfer. The brigade people really were glad to have us. I was originally assigned to the S3, which is the training section. My first sergeant went to the S4. It was not a good fit for either of us. We switched back, and I went over to the S4 shop, and the rest is history. I liked it. We straightened some things out, got it running again, and served over, I think, with 4 or 5 different S4 officers there, and really enjoyed it.
For the non-military, what is S4?
S4 is the Army divides their headquarters section into 4 sections, and the way they taught us was the word pits. S1, or at the brigade level and below, it's S. Brigade level above, it's G. So if you had Army level or division level, it would be a G, the same numbers. 1 being intelligence, or personnel, I'm sorry. The 2 is the intelligence, 3 is training, 4 is supply. So it's PITS, so the way they remember
So
that.
you chose the S of PITS.
Well, I was they didn't really, I guess I didn't really choose it. The division staff, the officers, decided it would be a good time to switch because neither of us were real comfortable where we were, and it turned out it was a good move. At least for me, it was. Sergeant Roosh, who was the one they switched over to 3, he stayed for about a year and then he retired. He had enough time to retire.
Well, it's interesting to me that this switch came for you while the United States was still very much involved in Southeast Asia. Did you have the feeling at any point that you might have to take a trip to the Far East? I know that Vietnam was basically a draft army augmented, whereas Afghanistan, Iraq, it's all volunteer. Did you ever think you were likely to be called up?
Yeah, there were several times when we felt that might be a possibility, but the way it was always explained to us, that we were being a training division, that our mission was to open up. If it really got bad, they would send us to Fort Carson, Colorado was the post we were supposed to go to, and we would start training troops. There was a reception station that would admit them. They would be assigned to the division, but they were training in Miami, Florida, and we only married up with them once, and it was a good thing. They were a lot of fun to be with, and but that would be our mission to do that. But there was always that uneasy feeling that, yeah, they could send us out. They could say, well, here's a unit, we need this particular unit for whatever purposes. We had a lot of people come in that owed the Army some time, that had been to Vietnam, and they blended in with our unit very well. We learned from them, and I think hopefully we were able to teach them a few things too, and some of them stayed in for, retired without thinking they were ever going to do that. But when they came back and saw that we had a good unit, they stayed. You
were never called upon to play the bugle that never sounds retreat.
No, never got to that point. But we, like I said, it was an interesting career in that played in the band and enjoyed that. But I think if I had to look at it, I would say that the 10 years I spent in the brigade headquarters were probably more rewarding overall. Both areas we felt we were very good. We were professionals. I never felt that I joined the reserve to be I was not a draft dodger. I had done that, I would have gotten out after my 8 years because I would have fulfilled my obligation. I enjoyed it. I felt I was doing something. I don't want to sound corny, but I felt that I owed this country something, and it's something that I enjoyed doing. So it was my honor to serve.
Well, as regards the two distinctly different parts of your career, um, were you awarded any medals or citations, certificates of appreciation?
Well, a couple of them are very interesting. The ones that we all got just kind of automatic was the Army Reserve Achievement Medal and the Army Reserve Components Medal. One was for 10 years continuous service. I have that with an hourglass device, which is a 20-year device, and an oak leaf cluster on the other one. It was new. And I've just found out there's a whole bunch of other medals. I have with the Department of Army right now pending 4 or 5 other medals that I found out that were perhaps overlooked that I was eligible for. But that's still pending. That process is a long one, and I just found out about it within the last year. The one that I'm very proud of is the Chicago Tribune used to give a medallion, and it's a civilian. It's in a block of plastic. For the outstanding reservists from the various armories. There was one from each armory usually is picked. I was the second one from the Waukegan Armory. The predecessor was also from the band, but there were 7 of those medallions awarded out of after they started the process down there. 7 guys from the band, including myself, won that medallion from the Chicago Tribune. So we weren't just horn tooters; we were soldiers also, and I'm very proud of that. Mine was presented by the Honorable David McGiffert, the Undersecretary of the Army. It was in 1965. I was a staff sergeant at the time. I'm very proud. It sits on my mantle. I'm very proud of that one.
As a reservist, your post was Waukegan, and you needed to go here, there, and elsewhere for both parts of your career, the musical and the non-musical. Did what you had to do professionally as a reservist, did it in any way impact your family at all?
Yeah, it did. It was certainly not as bad as what the guys go through today when they're deployed to a war zone, that sort of thing. But because I was a senior NCO and I did take it seriously, there was a lot of preparation time. There was a lot of going down to the armory on off training nights for administrative drills, no pay, no points, but to prepare for the drills. And there was some travel, like I say, around the 1st Brigade area to the various units for training purposes. I tried to keep up with some of the schooling and that sort of thing that I needed for promotion, that sort of thing. There are a couple of the employers I worked for. My annual training was my vacation. So family had to forego, the traditional 2 weeks at Disney World or whatever it would be, but they're very understanding. Proud to say my youngest son is a career Marine, about ready to retire as a major after 20-some years. So evidently he wasn't too upset by it. But
I was going to say, do you have any friendly familial rivalries as between Army and Marines?
Well, we have a very wonderful gentleman here who passed away some years ago. I don't know, you know Jack Frisbee, General Jack Frisbee, Major General, Marine Corps Reserve. And Jack and I were very good friends, and he was very, very happy when my son joined the Marine Corps, because we used to go back and forth a little bit whenever we got together about the merits of our services. But yeah, my son, I'm very, very proud of him. He's done some things that most people his age will never do, and some of them not so pleasant, but some of them were some fun things. Got to fly an F-18C. The pilot let him take the controls, and he's flown helicopters in C-5As and all kinds of different things. Being an infantry officer, that's kind of an interesting thing. So yeah, I'm proud of him. In fact, he should be doing this interview, not me.
people's attitudes toward you during a war which was, quote, not popular, end quote. Did the attitudes change at all?
You know, we never really felt, at least I didn't feel that there was any real animosity toward us in the reserve. Part of that probably is because maybe some of that we were in the band and we were doing what the purpose of the band is to promote a friendly feeling, a warm, fuzzy feeling between the military and the populace. That probably had a lot to do with it. We were always well received as a band because, quite frankly, we were good, and we put on a good show. We had a lot of fun. We interacted with the people, so I didn't feel it there. And then when I got over to brigade, I think even though the Vietnam War was still, a hot issue, I didn't feel that there was that much. Part of it may be because you're being in a reserve, you're more your hometown person, and people maybe that you're around know you a little better, and I think that maybe had something to do with it.
Well, I asked this because, of course, now I think the American people have become perhaps wiser in the ways of war and what it's all about, strangely, because there now is a clear separation between the actual conflict and the fact that people are serving the country. So while there still may be differences of opinion about the justness of the conflict, there seems to be no difference of opinion about the honor due to those who serve when called to do so. Am I making any sense?
I think it's exactly right. I think you're right on the ball with that. I'll never forget the first time, and somebody mentioned to me that I've been in the Army. I think they maybe asked about my ring, which my mother got me when I retired. And she said, "What's a ring?" I said, "My Army ring." And I said, "My mother got that when I retired from reserve." And she said, "Thank you for your service." I think it was at my doctor's office, as I recall. And I was really impressed with the feeling that I had, that somebody really cared and really, thank you. And I've experienced that many times now, because I'm very proud of wear the Army shirt, and I'm belong to the 85th Division Association. We get together 4 or 5 times a year and meet and talk out old times. But whenever I'm wearing my hat, anything like that, and people come up and say, "Thank you for your service," and it happens quite frequently, it's a good feeling. And I think you're right. People, the attitude has changed toward the military. They see what they're doing. There is, to my way of thinking, there is, outside of maybe the diplomatic service, there's no other place where you are put on the line quite the way the military is. And of course, I never was anywhere near what some of the guys have gone through. And my hat's off to them. It's just amazing, some of the sacrifice these guys have made and how they've come back from it.
Well, now I have to ask you, do people sort of take a pitying approach to you when the Army-Navy game comes up?
Yes, yeah. I had a fellow ask me about that. He said, the other day, I think I went in to vote, I had my hat on, and he said, "Well, I guess I know who you root for." I said, "Yeah, but I do a lot of crying."
Are you also a Chicago Cubs fan?
Unfortunately, I have to say yes to that. But I'm also a Blackhawks fan. So.
Okay. Well, looking back on the 27 years, once again divided so clearly between music and supply, do you remember any particularly memorable, funny, unusual things that happened?
Oh yeah, I've got a whole. I've started writing them down too, because I thought maybe something my sons might be interested in, just for
He
kids.
will be.
But one of the things we were in the band, we had a food service officer named Ralph Feibelson. He was a Chicago police. He was with the rat division of the Chicago Police Department. He's an IAD. Ran the mess hall. And we were in there when he loved to give us the business about being horn tooters and, you guys, I heard you playing, you were off key, and he loved to tease us. Well, our drum major bet him $20. He said, Ralph, he says, you just don't know what you're talking about. He says, if we came in here and we played, he says, we'd have the guys on their feet. No, you're on. So they bet $20. So the next day, noon meal, we walked down the middle of that mess hall and played the national anthem. Needless to say, everybody was on their feet, and Ralph was livid, but he paid the $20.
So you keep a personal diary?
I have. I've kept some notes, general notes, but I'm going to try to write it down a little more elaborately. Just some things that are some of the, like I say, some of the things that happened when I came over to the brigade. Some of the things that we were able to do, and some of the guys that were interesting. Three of the guys, when I first came in, the officers were really good. They let us run things the way senior NCOs are supposed to run things, and they signed papers and kept out of our way. And I'm eternally grateful
they read
to
them before they signed.
Oh yeah, they certainly did. But the three of us, there were three of us. The guy from the training site, the three sergeant, didn't decide to. We all started correspondence courses to become officers, get our commissions. The two of them became lieutenants. They went ahead with it. I decided I wanted to be an NCO. Being an officer wasn't for me, and I'm just as glad I did. I could have probably gone on to be a sergeant major, but at the time, Pat and I had just gotten married, and I would have had to transfer to a unit down in, I think a unit was in Princeton, Illinois at the time, more traveling, and I had my 27 years at that time. I said, well, I think it's time for me to retire. But looking back on it now, sometimes I kind of wish maybe I had gone for that sergeant major slot, but I have no regrets though. I feel I did my job. I was very proud of what we did, proud of the guys I served with, and I had a lot of fun too. I mean, that was a big part of it. We managed to have a good time. I had good people always around me.
Well, I was going to ask whether you made any close friendships while you served.
Oh, yeah, many. I don't see a lot of the guys, and some of them have passed away, unfortunately. But yeah, one of my best friends, in fact, he was we grew up together, went through grade school, high school together. He was was a reservist. He was with an artillery unit down at at O'Hare Airport. They were meeting down there at the time, and I kept trying to get him to come to Waukegan. Finally, an opening came, and he was a sergeant major, and he was a fire captain here in Waukegan Fire Department. And he and I see each other. I'm probably as close to him as I am my own brother, because we've gone through so many things together, and I see him quite frequently, and we do. But there's other guys I see every once in a while, and it's like we've never been away. I mean, it's and some of the officers. There were 5 officers went through the Waukegan unit, 5 or 6 that ended up with a star as general officers, and I see a couple of them when we have our reunion meetings, and they're really fine guys. I mean, it's call me by my first name.
It sounds to me like the supposed distinction between officers and enlisted was perhaps somewhat blurred in the reserve.
No, it was a little, perhaps a little different, because we got to know each other, because we were serving. The units weren't as big as in a regular army. There would have been more people around us, and probably you don't get to work that closely with the officers the way we did in the reserve. And we kept coming around. Some of the company officers would end up being staff officers at the brigade level. We got to know them a little better. One of the officers that was a brigade commander, I didn't see him hardly 1 or 2 times. I did most of my work through the executive officer and the S4 officer. But when he left to go to division, and he's one of the officers that ended up a major general. When he left, he was a bird colonel, and he came down to each section, and he came over to me, and I got up to greet him when he came in the office. He put his arm around me and thanked me for all the work I'd done for the brigade, and said that I'm going to division now. He said, if there's anything I can do for you there, don't hesitate to ask me. And he really meant it. And I was very moved by that. And because I didn't know that he knew I existed, but he came and made a point to talk. And I talked to him a couple of times after that. I did get to see him, and I see him quite frequently now at these the reunion meetings of the unit. And I related that story to him, and he said, "Well, thank you for sharing that with me." He said, "I never thought about that," but I said it meant a lot to me. And we had some bad officers, just some that were out for themselves, and that was all. But most of the officers we served with were fine people, and we got along good. They recognized that we all had things to offer, that most of them let the NCOs do what the NCOs are supposed to do, and we never let them down, I don't think. And
so you're in the American Legion and the Friends of the 85th Division.
Yeah, that's a kind of a loose term. It's kind of a loose organization, but it's we meet frequently and we have good time.
Uh-huh.
We have some lunch and a few libations, and we enjoy it.
That I take it is more the Friends of the 85th as opposed to the
American Legion. Yes, I am not very active with the American. I've only been a member for a couple of years at the American.
Uh-huh.
John Davis and Dan Tashinsky here at our church got me to twist my arm a little bit, but I intend to get more active with it.
Let me ask, how would you say after a long service, how did this affect your life in general?
Big impact on my life, I think. I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I could do things I never thought I could do, and not just the military things. It was the public speaking, for instance. You know me very well that I have never had a problem with talking. But I learned that partly through the Army, to be able to get up in front of a group and not freeze, panic, or anything like that. You give a class and you sit in front of, go through the murder boards, they used to call it. All the other NCOs would sit, senior NCO would sit there. You'd have to do the class for them, and they'd tear you apart. So you learn to speak a little bit on your feet, and it was that part, the self-confidence that I developed, I think, in the military was something that I perhaps would not have developed on my own in civilian life, because the circumstances are a lot different in the military, and you have to do it.
Did this experience influence at all your thinking about the necessity to go to war, or the position of the military in our society in general?
Oh yeah, I think about that a lot. I still think about it today as a retiree. It's cliche to say it, but freedom isn't free. And sometimes bad people have to be put in their place. And I think every person who has given any thought about it is in the military would prefer not to ever to have to fire that rifle at anybody, or shoot a gun, or to drop a bomb if it wasn't really necessary. And I think that's perhaps was the biggest misconception between the civilian population and the military. I don't think that was ever really, until recently, probably ever really delineated properly, that sometimes you have to use force to preserve what we have. And I think that the Army of the United States right now is probably the finest Army that the world has ever seen. And it's all volunteer, as you said earlier.
Well, on a personal note, as you know, Ed, you represent the eagle's talon with the arrows. I spent almost as long in the foreign service as you did in the military service, 26 years. My talon is the olive branch, and they're both there for a reason. And some of the finest experiences I had in the foreign service working with our military overseas, and from defense attaches all the way down through the NCOs. I've had wonderful experiences working with the military, and we are the same team.
Absolutely. I think that's, could not have said it better. That's great, yes.
Anything you want to add that we haven't covered in the interview?
I can't really think of anything. As I said, my career compared to some of the other guys of stories to tell is pretty bland, but I do think it's unique, maybe in some ways. It was never like I said, never my intention to be a draft dodger, and I am very proud of being a part of the United States Army, and that reserve part of it doesn't always show up when I get correspondence from the Department of Army over different things, and it's I think something right now that the Reserve and National Guard have never ever been more important to the United States Army than it is at this point. They've never relied on the Reserve and Guard the way they have now. We had a talk at our last meeting of the 85th Friends of the 85th, the deputy commander of the 1st Army, and he said over a third of that command is made up of Reserve National Guard. He said, we can't work without them, they can't work without us. So it is truly now, we're talking, they've changed it was one Army, one team, and an Army of one, which nobody liked, and now it's Army Strong. And I think that's the important thing. It is Army Strong, but it's because of the regular Army, the Reserve, and the National Guard have shown that they can do the job.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure interviewing you.
It's been a pleasure being interviewed.
Oh, say the time, please. Just say the time.
The time is now 10:15.